Hello once again, my digital mutants. It is I, Domiko L. Cunningham, better known as Dr. Media, with your digital daily prescription fix. So, in the last couple of weeks, we have been looking at my FreeNAS box, and we've looked at things like being able to set up our own on-cloud server, also with setting up our doing our MySQL installation, which is our FAMP installation. So one thing I wanted to look at, and some of the stuff when you're dealing with FreeNAS, because FreeNAS is actually a very, very powerful system. FreeNAS, as we know, is built on top of the FreeBSD operating system. So that makes it very good for server storage and doing a lot of server intensive things. So one of the other ways that I use my FreeNAS server within my home is I actually use my FreeNAS server as just as a file server. So if I go in here, and right now if I go in here underneath storage and look at my volumes, you can see currently right now I have my Phoenix render volume, which we've seen before, which is a single drive. This is a single 500 gig drive that is not being, the data that's on this is not being mirrored, it is not being rated, it is just a single drive connected to one of the SATA ports. And I just use this for my, as I've said before, for my render dump when I'm rendering to my render server, or from my render servers. And then I have my PH media drive, which is my main media drive. And then I now have this PHMX strip drive. This strip drive is actually pretty nice, because with this strip drive what I've done is, this is not rated. So this is not a RAID drive, this is actually a stripe drive. So this is 3 1 terabyte disks that are striped. So all it's really doing is giving me storage. And the things that are here are not going to be here for a long amount of time. So I don't care if this actually corrupts. I mean, I hope it doesn't corrupt, but if it does corrupt, the data that's here is replaceable data. So this is data that's not going to stay. What I think is going to end up happening is I'm going to replace the PHX render data pool with this new PHX MX strip or stripe pool. So one thing I wanted to be able to do was actually have a lot of speed and not really care about being able to store stuff over a long period of time, because it's not going to be kept here. Now, what I do have, and if we look at my disk, I'm going to go here and say view disk. So you'll notice that my FreeNAS server is actually housing 3 1 terabyte drives, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2 terabyte drives. And then there's that one 500 gigabyte drive that's in there. So what I've done is I have one pool of drives, and those are three 2 terabyte drives. So that's what gives me my PHX Media version 2. What I'm going to do with these additional four 2 terabyte drives is I'm going to also set this up in RAID 5, meaning that I can lose one of these drives and still keep all of my data. Now if I lose 2 drives, I would end up losing everything. I don't want to set this to basically RAID 6, because I would lose space. So I want to have the advantage of having the maximum amount of space across these four drives, but also having a huge amount of failover, and which I get a failover of 1, which for me is not a bad thing. Now I did want to give a really great and good shout out to the guys over at Refurb for Less. It's one of the companies that I actually order a lot from on eBay. They have these Hitachi drives right now, and they have them over there for sale. I'll actually put a link to their eBay store in this video, and if you're looking for some really good drives, 2 terabyte drives, then check over there. Now I will tell you, and one of the reasons why I really do kind of stand behind these guys is that I got all of my 2 terabyte drives from them. These drives are pulls, so these are not brand new 2 terabyte drives. For the price these drives are, you're not going to get anything better for the price that these are. So these are second-hand drives. But that's the whole point of using a RAID. A RAID should be set up, or it can be set up with a inexpensive array of disk, and that's really what a RAID is. It's a redundant array, inexpensive disk. So for this, I'm not too concerned with using these pulled drives. Now I will say, when I ordered from them, I got 3 bad drives. And am I mad at them? No, I'm actually not. I got 3 bad drives. I sent the first drive back, got another drive, it didn't work either. Got a second drive in, it didn't work. So in my communication back and forth, and that's one thing I can say, they're really great on following up with communication. And a lot of eBay resellers don't, they just kind of let you go, and they don't care if what you ordered works or not. So they were really good about replacing those drives. So the last time that I got the drives replaced, I actually asked the excuse me, the attendant if he didn't mind finding me 2 drives and testing them before they sent them. One thing that I will say is that when the drives are sent, they're already packaged inside of their anti-static bags. So they look like an OEM drive, but they're pulls. So just know that. The drives that you're getting are pull drives, so don't go crying if the drive doesn't work. Just replace the drive. Just get a replacement for the drive. So in the last 2, because I had returned 3 drives, I asked, well, hey, can you just pull me 2 drives and test them before you send them? They did that, and I didn't have a problem. I got the 2 drives, and they were perfectly fine working drives. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the guys over at Refurb for Less. I think they do a fantastic job over there. And if you're looking for refurbed parts and stuff like that for computer, it's always a hit or miss when you order refurb stuff or pulled parts from servers or things like that. These Hitachi drives are actually a really, really good drive. These are enterprise class drives. These are not the desktop class drives. And if you don't know, a lot of stuff when it comes to heavy enterprise server use, that stuff has a life cycle set to it. So if the life cycle is 2 years or 3 years, in some cases they'll set a really low life cycle because the disks are really cheap for them to buy. These hard drives are probably about $120 a piece for a 2 terabyte drive if you were to get them brand new. So you're getting them for a huge discount. Someone's already taken the hit on the depreciation of the drive. So the 1 terabyte drives that I have in here, these 1 terabyte drives, I bought these drives brand new. They were they were $59 a piece. So you gotta see in here, I've got about $180 invested in this array right here of 1 terabyte drives, and I was able to get 2 terabyte drives for significantly less. Now you might think I'm dancing around the price of these drives. I'm really not. Because prices fluctuate so much on eBay, I don't want to give you a price for the drives that what have I paid for them, and and they could be a little bit more, they could be a little bit less. So I don't really want to get into prices, but if you go over to Refurb for Less, you can check out the great stuff they have for sale on their eBay page. So what I wanted to do is show how to set up a volume. So I'm going to show you how I set up my volume. So I'm going to go here to my volume manager, and you'll see that it's telling me I have available disk, and I have 1 to 2 terabyte drives, and I have 4 drives are showing up. So these 4 drives can now, if I mouse over this, you can see DA4, DA5, DA6, and DA7 can be added. They can either extend the volume. So if you see right here, I can click on one of the volumes that I already have. So if I click on like this media, on my media volume here, I can actually drag this out and extend my volume. So it will extend my volume by 1, or I can make a brand new volume. I'm going to make a brand new volume. So this is going to be PHX media, and this is going to be 1. So I'm going to make this media 1. And I'm not going to encrypt it. You could encrypt this. If you want to go back and encrypt it at any time, you can encrypt it. I will say, when it comes to encryption, it uses the GEIL, so the GEIL encryption. It is a really good encryption, but you have to make sure that you keep up with your keys, or you keep up with the password that you set for the encrypted drive. Because once you encrypt it, you can only decrypt the data if you have the original key, or you have the original passcode that you set for the encryption key. So you need to keep both of those. What I did, and I will tell you, my PHX Media Stripe, that those 1 terabyte drives, those 3 1 terabyte drives, that pool right here is set up with encryption on it. Because even though there's things on there that I don't want to keep, I also, when I refurb these drives, or when I repurpose these drives, I don't want that data found. I don't want that data kept. So if you want to encrypt your data, you can go in here and you can encrypt all of your data. But I will tell you, you need to keep up with the keys for those pools, because if anything ever happens, let's say you have to replace a drive or something like that, and it's going to happen. One of your drives fails, and you've got to replace that drive in the pool. You're going to have the encryption key to be able to decrypt the data so that you can add that other file back in there. Or if you just upgrade your FreeNAS box. Let's say you upgrade your FreeNAS box and you make a new box. You've got to have the encryption key when you put your hard drives back into the new box so that you can once again access that data. Or if you do certain upgrades to FreeNAS, you'll need those encryption keys. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing encryption, make sure you keep up with all those keys. So what I'm going to do is I'm making my volume manager. I got my PHX Media 1, and I'm not going to encrypt it. I'm going to drag this over to the 4, and you can see right here I've got 4 drives, and they're going to be set up for RAID Z2. So this is realistically going to be a mirror RAID. So I could lose, with RAID Z2, I could lose 2 drives in this array and still be able to keep all of my data. And you'll notice what's happening is that the estimated capacity of this drive will be 3.63 terabytes. Excuse me, which is not that large, right? This is not that big of a pool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this, if I set it to Stripe, if I set this to Stripe, you'll see that my size is now 7.27 terabytes, which is a lot better. You would think that it would end up being 2, 4, 6, 8 terabytes, but the couple of terabytes in here, the couple of terabytes in here that are missing, or the space that's missing, is for the ZFS file system itself to basically keep up with these drives. So you're never going to get full capacity out of all the drives that you put into a RAID array. That's never going to happen. So I don't want to stripe it, because striping it means that I can't lose any of these drives. If I lose a drive, then I lose my data. So I want to at least put this into RAID Z. If I put it in RAID Z, I get 5.45 terabytes of space, which I'm actually happy with. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want to add the volume, and you'll see it'll write out my volume in the volume manager. So it's writing it out. And this might take a little bit of time just to set up, but it's going to write out my volume and give me a brand new volume. Now, the thing that I will say, when you're working with your volumes, if you just want to have that base volume can show up as a Windows share or a CIFS share, and it just be that. It just be that one big gigantic hard drive, or one gigantic size of space. And that's completely fine. You can do that. That works completely fine. It works well. There's not an issue with it. But what I like to do, and you can see it kind of in my shares behind our volume manager running, you can see that I like to break up my shares into individual data sets. So if I go in here and look at my volume manager, now you'll see that I've got this whole PHX media, and the availability of it is going to be 7.2 terabytes. And then my PHX Media 1, which is a default data set that's made. Whenever you make a brand new volume, it makes a data set named after that volume. So this is a data set that could actually be set up and be one gigantic data set, and that be it. But what I like to do is make individual data sets, because by making individual data sets, I can give them limits on how big they can get. So I can say, like my shows data set, if I double click on this, Let's go in here and look at the options for this data set. So for this data set in here, if I go to advanced mode, you can see that I set a quota of this data set for 1 terabyte. So I don't want this data set to get larger than 1 terabyte. And it's telling me right now that I'm using 17% of that. And then I can see in here my biggest share or my biggest data set that I'm using is my movies data set, which is like 1.6 terabytes. And it's 50% full. And I can see available, I got 1.2 terabytes available, right about a terabyte left of space. And that's where most of my media is at. Most of my media resides on that share right here on this PHX Media 2. So on Media 1, I'm gonna offload some of those movies and offload them. And I really want to offload them not because I'm having any kind of degradation from everything on one set of drives. I really want to offset it because when I'm using multiple devices in my home, because I've got about 4 different Android set-top boxes that I'm using to access the data that's on these drives. So I'm using that. So if I'm accessing it in one room and then there's 3 other people in the house accessing it, and then I'm also accessing it in my office. That's a lot of people accessing one pool of hard drives. So what I want to do is take some of those movies and TV shows and things like that and offload that. The other thing that I'm using this FreeNAS box for is I'm going to start using it as an all-in-one home DVR. I'm going to be using the home run DVR setup and using a digital antenna and basically piping digital signal throughout the whole entire house over Ethernet and being able to use my FreeNAS server as my DVR recording server, because Kodi does a really great job of being able to play back media that you've saved, and so you can record stuff and be able to use that. I'm going to be using the home run DVR, and I'll show when I set that up, because it's all about the cable cutter stuff that I like doing too. So I'll show you how to set that up and use that with your FreeNAS box. So that's how you set up a new volume for Kodi. Well, not for Kodi, but for FreeNAS. So with this PHX Media, I could come in here right now, and you can see I can't add anything to this, but I can add things to this original. So you'll see that there's always going to be this PHX Media and this PHX Media 1. This was always made. You cannot, well, you could delete this, but it makes no sense to delete this. So you don't want to delete this data set here. So I can make a brand new data set. So I could come in here and say create data set, and I create my data set. I can give it a name. I could call this movies 2. Let's call it movies 2. And I'm gonna make this let's make it a Unix share type and case sensitive, and it'll inherit everything about it. I'm going to make sure deduplication is off. I can look at advanced. I could come in here and give it a quota for the data set and give it a quota for its children. And I can reserve the space. I'm just going to say add data set, and let's make a data set. And what this will do is it'll make me a brand new data set, and you see there I go. I have a movies data set. It has inherited the LZ4 compression, and it's got a 1.0 times compression right now. That's the other thing you can look at too. When you look at these different shares, you'll see that some of these shares actually are compressed. Like my Plex media server, it's being compressed. You can see right here, it's at 1.23 compression. So this is actually really good. It's being compressed down. So keep those things in mind when you set up your own. When you're setting up your volumes and everything else. If I look at my disk, one thing that I like to do for my disk in here, I like to turn on my power management. So I can turn on power management and acoustics. You can say medium. Power management, I usually set mine to 254, or you can set it to intermediate power usage with standby and whatever you want. Right now, this is set to minimum power usage with standby, so it'll spin down, and you can set it to that. Actually, I think I will set all these to that. So what will happen is after a while, these drives will spin down if they're not being accessed. That way it helps to prolong the life of these drives because they're not always constantly spinning. If you know that your server is going to be hit constantly, then don't have any spin down. Just leave them wherever they are. And usually that's what I usually do that. I don't know why these are set to 254, but I usually set these on 1 so they can spin down when they're not in use and be able to see that. So, and you'll see right here, these are set to always on. I never leave them like that. I always let them to hit standby mode after 5 minutes and minimum. Now, if you're getting really bad performance out of your drives, you might want to turn on the advanced power management and leave them to be always. You might, if you're getting bad performance, like if you're getting really long transfer times, you might want to say, use maximum power so that it spins up the drive and keeps it spun up, and you can be able to transfer stuff at a high megabyte rate. But for these, I don't transfer stuff to this stuff very often. Now, I will say this one right here for my 500 terabyte, because this is the one that's being accessed more often, I probably will leave this one at something like maximum power, just because this is a drive that would be used that way. I might even do the same thing to my 1 terabyte drives, because I'm going to end up using these 1 terabyte drives in that pool as temp folders. So when I do my video editing, this will be a temp folder that's not on my computer, because it's always nice to be able to have temp folders not on the computer that you're actually using, and actually accessing the same drive that you're working on. So that's it. That's setting up a FreeNAS pool and a volume and Dataset inside of FreeNAS. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, hit that subscribe button down at the very bottom. And remember, as I said before, check out my friends over at Refurb for Less, and they've got some really great stuff going through their page right now. I think they've actually got some CPUs over there, and some of these Hitachi drives are left. These Hitachi drives are, as I said, I like them. These drives are awesome. And like I said before, just know you might get a couple of drives that are not great. Just make sure you're being in constant contact with them and hit them back. So, and actually these drives have a 180-day warranty on them, which is, for a pooled drive, that's not that bad. That's actually pretty awesome. So check them out over there at Refurb for Less, and I will see you next time.